Hey everybody, it's Mama Kay coming at you one more time from her special home office in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I'm feeling a little extra giggly today because the person I'm interviewing has a near and dear place in my heart, and it's kind of weird because we're actually in the same house as I'm doing the interview. So without further ado, special guest, who are you?
Well, I'm pretty sure you know who I am, but my name is Chris, if you don't know me. And yeah, I'm upstairs right now doing this interview with you. Yeah, I'm currently the president of the River East Transcona Teachers Association, and I'm also the one of the board members on the provincial executive for the Manitoba Teachers Society.
So Chris Darazsi, why in the world would I be interviewing you if that is your job and there's nothing particularly musical about it?
That's a very good question, Joanne Koshelek. Yeah, probably because I did spend 17 years teaching band, middle years band, starting back from, I guess, 1999 is when I started teaching. And I've been doing this current job for about 4 years now.
So where did you teach?
My first teaching job was actually in Flin Flon. I took a 1-year job teaching. Well, it wasn't a 1-year job, but I only stayed there for the 1 year. I found it a little bit too isolating for me. It was difficult with, being the only band teacher well, there was one other band teacher it was Lisa Ani, actually, fantastic person, in that area. And it was very difficult, I thought, especially as a young teacher at the time, being so separated from the rest of my colleagues. So I taught there for 1 year. Then I went and I taught at, while I was in Flin Flon, I was the itinerant band teacher. So I was doing middle years there, 3 different schools, and I was going from school to school between the 3. Then when I went back to Winnipeg, I taught at École Saint Germain, was 5 years there as the band teacher, again, middle years. That was grades just 7 and 8 at the time. And there were 4 different schools, the one I was stationed in, and then there were 3 other schools that had students that were busing to me for band, and that was all French immersion students there. And then in 2005, I came over to River East Transcona and started teaching there at École Regent Park, and that was still is a grade 5 to 8 middle years school.
So have you always taught middle years band?
I have always taught middle years band. It's the best age to teach, absolutely.
Why do you like it so much?
I struggle personally with younger kids. It's not really my thing. It's just the way I am. I own it. It's not my cup of tea to deal with the younger kids. And I would be fine with the high school kids. I think it would suit my personality fine. But I just really enjoy seeing the transition and the growth of the middle years kids. I mean, when you get them and the first thing you're teaching them is, how to put the instrument together, even, and the excitement and the progress they make, especially in that first year of playing. It's just crazy. And then when they get to grade 8 and you finally got to let them go, and they go off to high school, and you're handing them off to somebody wonderful in almost every case, really. It's I don't know, it's just the progress they make, and their sense of humor and the way they interact with each other and the way they develop socially at that age. I think it's a fantastic age to teach.
I know that you've taught many of them the art of sarcasm.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You actually developed something very, very cool when you started at École Regent Park. I think perhaps it was started out of almost necessity because you started with grade 5s. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of the exploratory program you had going there and how you developed it?
Yeah, that was sort of an invention out of necessity in a sense too, because as I just sort of said, I don't really have the early years training either. It's not really, I just never really pursued that. And so when I was teaching the grade 5s at that time, I struggled a fair bit, and it came to me that I was essentially becoming my own feeder school. I had an opportunity there where I could take the grade 5s, still cover the grade 5 curriculum, but do it in a different way. And so we would take the first half of the year and and sort of build up their musical knowledge and their skills. And it was a little bit maybe around the theoretical side, but we still had curriculum to cover. But then at a certain point, we would get class sets of instruments: flute, clarinet, trumpet, and trombone. We make sure at a point in time I would have a full class set of each of those instruments. So I might have 27, 28 flutes. Then a month later, I'd have the same number of clarinets, and then the same number of trumpets and trombones, for the remaining months of the year. And then that would really give the kids an opportunity to play that instrument and sort of dig deeper into whether or not that was an instrument that they wanted to pursue and stick with as they went along in their band career. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that too many times, and it works out great in most cases, but there was just a great advantage to having kids spend that much time on an instrument before making that decision of what they want to play. And it's just not possible in so many cases. But I was lucky that in my situation, it was possible, and I had the support of my principal and the school community in general, and it worked out really well. And so when they made that decision, and then in most cases they made the right decision. They decided themselves, you know what, I gave it a fair shot. I thought I wanted to play this instrument, but it's just not working out for me. The next one maybe will work out better. And every kid is able to get success on one of them, right? It's just a matter of making the time and the effort to figure out which one that is.
So that's a pretty big investment. When you first started, did the school have to buy those instruments? Were the kids renting them? Did you have a music store to back you up? How did you make that work for anybody who might want to try that out for their school?
Yeah, good question. Initially, we had great support from local music stores, and it was St. John's at the time, back when I started this plan, and they would lend us the instruments. It was that simple. They said, okay, well, like the prime renting season was over, and they had instruments still in the warehouse, and they were okay with letting us borrow those instruments, and it worked out really well. Ultimately, going forward, we did slowly accumulate a fleet of instruments that were purchased by the school division, and they were housed there at the school. And then other schools actually started jumping on board with this as well, which makes sense if the division was buying the instruments that they should be used. So then what we started doing between myself and 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 other schools, excuse me, after a couple of years of me doing this program, they jumped on board as well, and we did a rotation of those instruments. So there weren't instruments sitting around not being used, so that they could be used by kids in other schools, and it worked out well for those schools too. And it works out particularly well if you've got those kids in the building with you, like in a K-8 school. Then that works out well. It's definitely more difficult if you're in a exclusively like grades 6, 7, 8, 9, or so I guess it would be 6 to 9 school. It's a little tougher, but it can be done.
I think it's probably great for parents to have their children too try out an instrument, and they really then they're going to help the process of supporting their children more if they see that, oh yeah, no, I remember my kid tried this out for 6 weeks and they were successful, rather than, oh my goodness, I'm having to spend hundreds of dollars a year on something that I don't know if my kid's going to have any success on.
Yeah, it certainly builds up some excitement from the kids, and that transfers up to their parents, because parents want their kids to be excited and be successful. And I don't know any parent that doesn't. And I've taught a lot of kids in my day. Every parent wants their kids to be successful and excited about what's happening in school. And yeah, if the kids are excited about it, and they see that the kids have had an experience with this already and it's been positive, absolutely, they definitely get much more on board with it.
Now, can you imagine if little Chris Darazsi, way back in the day, had exploratory band? I wonder if he would have chosen a different instrument. So why don't you take us way back, doodle 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 doodle, to baby Chris Darazsi? What was your musical journey? How did you get there?
Well, I was born with a clarinet. No, well, I had my own odd experience, because in a sense, I almost did have a similar experience to what I ended up doing as a band teacher. I started playing in band in grade 5. The school I went to was a grade 5 to 9 school at the time. So there was band from starting in grade 5
What school was that?
through grade 9. That was at Robert Andrews. Fred Merritt was the teacher there at the time. And yeah, so I was there for grade 5 and grade 6. And they actually phased out the grade 5 and 6 the year after I was there. I hope it had nothing to do with my attendance there, but after I finished, yeah, they got rid of those 2 grades and they went over to the other school, the 5 and 6 kids, and then Robert Andrews became a 7 to 9. But back to the story, I started band in grade 5 and was also in band in grade 6. But then in grade 7, I went to a different school. I went to Monroe for French immersion school, and everyone in Monroe they were just starting band at that time. They were all beginners. And I had already had 2 years of playing. Now, I wasn't very good. Grade 5 and grade 6, my band marks were not very good. I was sort of into it. I mean, it didn't really excite me at the time. But then when I got to grade 7 and suddenly I was like, I knew what I was doing and everybody else was just starting off and I had this head start. And I thought, well, this is okay. Now this is kind of cool. And the teacher, Mrs. Bloor, Marcia Bloor, recognized that and encouraged me and pushed me ahead a little bit. And I saw that happening and I saw success in that. And I just kind of took advantage of that, started taking some private lessons. My private teacher said, you know what, you need to go to the person who was teaching me because I can't take you any further than this. So then I went to another private teacher, Cor Gaudry, and he was a fantastic private teacher. And then I went on through high school at Miles Mac, and Zane Zallis was my band teacher there at the time.
And how did you know you wanted to go into music as a career? Because a lot of kids love band in high school, but don't do anything more with it. What pushed you to go that extra step?
It's hard to say what exactly pushed me to do that. I think it was just a realization, particularly in junior high, that's like, you know what, I like this. Like not right away in grade 7, but I would say grade 8 or grade 9. And at the time, Monroe was a 7, 8, 9 school. And it was a realization that I'm competent at this. I'm pretty good at this. I like it. And I like teaching. I mean, I didn't know so much at the time about like teaching. I didn't have a lot of teaching experience per se, but I liked the environment. I really felt that it was a good fit. And that was just sort of solidified through high school where, you know, like I've watched some of your other interviews, as you know, and a lot of your other interviewees have said the similar things where you'd spend every spare in high school in the band room, either practicing or just hanging out with people that were of the same mindset, right? Like it's just the environment and everything. And it really felt like, you know, this sounds cheesy, but it really just felt like home, right? And I thought, okay, I can do this. I was still at the time toying with the idea of going into performance as a career. You know, as I continued with my private lessons and I had the privilege of doing that, it was on my mind. It wasn't the front of my mind, though. It was just sort of nagging in the back. Like, do I want to perform as a career or not? And then, so when I did end up going to university, I went to Brandon University for 5 years. Yeah, 5 years to get my 4-year degree, but that's another story. My music degree from Brandon University is a performance degree, and that's sort of my philosophy there. Was I wanted to make sure that I learned how to play my instrument to the best of my ability at that time. And then I got my after degree from U of M, my 2-year after degree, before I started teaching in the middle year schools. Not sure if that answered your question.
I think so. Who was your clarinet prof at BU?
Dr. Goddard, Ron Goddard. Yeah.
Who do you think you based your teaching mostly off of? Out of the people that taught you?
That's a tough one. You know, I don't think I can answer that out of the people that taught me necessarily, because so many people have taught me. It wasn't just a matter of like, you know, I started with Fred Merritt and then Marcia Bloor and then Zane Zallis. I mean, it wasn't just a matter of them. I mean, not only then, you could think in terms of when I went through my education degree, my cooperating teachers that I was student teaching with. I learned a ton from them as well. Connie Turner being certainly very influential on my career, and but there are others. I mean, I'm not going to start naming names because I'm going to start leaving people off. So I mean, I've already started, but there's just, that's the thing with our community, our band community in Manitoba particularly, is we're all learning from each other all the time. And to say any one person has had the most influence on me personally, I know some of your interviewees have really had, somebody in particular. I think it's really been a culmination of just really trying to expose myself to as many great band teachers over my career as I could. And everybody's got something to offer. Every teacher you come across can teach you something. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what that is, and then making it your own.
We really are super lucky in this province. I mean, I was lucky enough many years ago to teach alongside of you for a little while, and even just that little bit, that 0.25 position, right? It taught me so many things, but most importantly, that this is what I want to do. Like, because of the teaching I did with you, I went back and I got my ed degree, and I started this new career. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Well, I could easily say that you've become a successful band teacher despite me. I don't think that I really deserve thanks, but I appreciate it. I think it's more despite me more than anything else.
Do you have any advice for any students who might be watching this who are possibly thinking about going into music as a career?
It goes back a little bit to what I was saying about how my path, and it's not, there are many paths you can take to get to this point. My path was one of taking the performance degree first, and I know others have done the same thing. And it was the idea that I wanted to make sure that, again, that I had learned my instrument to the best of my ability at the time. And my advice would be my advice particularly, I mean, others will differ, would be to do that, to make sure you know your instrument and know it inside out, and know it to the point where you are super comfortable demonstrating and playing and being an example of tone and technique and just excellence that you can demonstrate for your students. But it's in learning your instrument and your craft that well, you need to remember all those techniques that you're using to teach yourself. I mean, that's the thing, when you're going through private lessons and you're going through university courses, and you're learning your instrument. So you see your in my case, my clarinet teacher once a week or so, but the other 6 days, it's up to me to figure it out. I'm the one that has to figure out what is going to work for me to learn the material for the following week. So whatever skills that you are using as a student, whatever the level, you need to remember those and then transfer them over into your teaching down the road. You can't forget what it's like to be a beginner, though. And that's the trap I fell into as a young teacher. And I've seen other younger teachers fall into that trap as well, because you go through university and things come fairly easily to you a lot of the times, or you're going to go and you're going to play high school music and you see, well, I can sight read this. This is not a problem. But you have to remember what it's like for when it was a problem, right? So I have to think back sometimes when I'm teaching band, when I struggled with something, what did I do to fix it? Not just, look at the music and say, well, this is fairly easy, and just hand it out to them and expect them to be able to play it. If I was playing, Stravinsky pieces for clarinet, those are tough, right? Those are tough technical pieces. And you got to slow it down, and you got to practice it slowly, and you got to learn that muscle memory and all that stuff. And then you have to remember those techniques that you use then, and then apply them to your teaching as a band teacher, in my case, as a middle years band teacher. Okay, so I realize that this is half notes, but we're going to slow it down anyways, right? Or quarter notes, or even eighth notes, whatever it might be, but we're going to slow it down, and we're going to just build that muscle memory. And while we're doing it, we're going to listen to our tone, and we're going to do all these things. It's just, the techniques are all the same. It's just, my advice would be not to fall into the same trap I did as a young teacher, and and remember that they're beginners, and they've got the same learning, the same, I guess it's almost a cycle of learning that we had. It's just at a different level.
I think it's also very important that we remember how scary it can be, right? To remember to put ourselves in those positions where we're unsure, where we're not the expert. I know every single time I go and I perform something that's not really, really easy, it brings me back, it checks me back in. It gives me that level of humility, right? It's humbling to remember how scary it is to play in front of someone when it doesn't feel secure.
Yeah, exactly. I can think, and again, we can use our own examples. I remember playing back in juries and playing grad recitals and stuff at university. I mean, you have to assume that, you know, you would have a fair amount of confidence in your ability at the time, but they were still nerve-wracking, and there was a lot on the line. And just like when you're 13 or 12 years old and you're playing in front of your peers, or even if you're just playing alone in front of your teacher to demonstrate your learning, it's the same kind of stress. It's just at a different level. It's a performance anxiety, and it's tough for them to deal with sometimes. And we have to do what we can to help them through that. I mean, that's a skill in itself, right? I mean, the presentation skills and the confidence and the speaking skills and the ability to make mistakes and learn from them and not dwell on them. That was one of my biggest struggles, I thought, as I was developing as a young musician, was any mistakes I made, I was quite hard on myself for those. And I think that's why I became, perhaps at the sacrifice of my tone quality as a player, I became much more of a technical player, because I couldn't handle, in my own mind, making mistakes, technical and note mistakes while I was playing. So yeah, you're right. I mean, we have to remember that and sort of create that safe area or safe space, for lack of a better term, for kids to make mistakes and play and learn, and be a model of that.
Yeah, exactly. They don't need to see us perfectly, right? They need to see us being human.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's difficult too. I mean, thinking back to the young teachers, where is a young teacher going to get their confidence from, though? As a young first year teacher, and you're going out in front of your class, you also do have to think of yourself as, you know, these kids are looking to me to be an example of, you know, what I'm supposed to sound like too, right? And I am, you know, I am the one at the front of the room for a reason too, right? So there's a balance to be found there. I'm the one at the front facing the class, but at the same time, you're not perfect, right? So there's a balance there to be found, for sure. We're all there to learn, whether you're facing the class or whether you're in the class. It's we're all learning together. It's just, again, just different levels of learning and different points along that path.
Before I get to my last question with you, I just want to give a little shout out to the division that you and I both grew up in, because I think we were both given some pretty fantastic opportunities by people like Conrad Mendres, who put together the divisional honor bands that you and I were both a part of. And that, you know, I'm a year older than you, but we were in the same bands together growing up. And I know for me, that helped give me huge amounts of confidence. And I got to play rep that was harder than I would in my own band. It was really important. And I think that really pushed me to love music even more.
Yeah, I would agree. And the neat thing about that is that, how do I put this? There's always a bigger fish. And when you start doing stuff like that, you know, I'm speaking from my experience, and I'm sure yours is very similar. As somebody who was very interested in music and interested in playing and pursued it as something that we wanted to excel in, it could easily have become a situation where, you know, your ego starts to take over. And it's like, okay, well, I'm the, you know, best player in my junior high. And then you go to high school, and then you realize, oh, there's a bunch of people that are better than me here, right? And then you do these divisional honor bands, and you see people from other schools that maybe are the same age, but oh, they're better than me too.
I
Okay.
still remember the name of the girl who was better than me that I always wanted to get the solo away from. Timmy Thompson. Absolutely. She kicked my butt every time, and she went to Miles Mac.
Well, I went to Miles Mac. I mean, what are you gonna, but
We won't go there.
yeah, we won't go there now. We'll do that off camera and we can argue about that.
So,
But it's about, I don't know if this is anticipating your next question or not, but it's really important in my mind to surround yourself with people that are better than you. There's very little to be learned from being the best in the group. Maybe some leadership skills if you're a section leader and you're learning some leadership skills that way. But I honestly feel that there's much more to be gained by surrounding yourself with people that are better than you, and always looking for that group or that ensemble that you can play with where you can aim higher, and you're going to play better, you're going to play closer to their level when you're surrounding yourself with people that are stronger than you. And you're also going to see examples, right? You're going to see, wow, that person really sounds good. How do I make myself sound like that? Even like, okay, what kind of mouthpiece are they using? What strength reed are they using? What, all these different little things that how did you learn that? What practice technique did you learn from that, where you can talk to these people? But I really do think that is another little tidbit of advice, perhaps, where you can learn a lot from like I said, going and putting yourself in a position where you're not the best. You maybe you're even towards the bottom part of that, the bottom level there, but that's the place to be, and you have to have some confidence to put yourself in those spots, but it's worth it.
and that goes with anything that you do in life, not just music.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That because yeah, it's always about pushing yourself into a context maybe where you're not super comfortable, and then getting used to that, and you then grow into that, and then you go to the next level, and you push yourself into the next spot. It's like, I found like public speaking, for example, is a good example of that, because when I first started teaching, I'd be nervous just even talking in front of the class, right? You got 20, 30 kids in the class, maybe more, and they're all looking at you, and that's a form of public speaking, but you get used to that pretty quickly. You're doing it every day, all day, and you get fairly used to that. But then the first time I had to talk at a staff meeting, well, that's a different situation. Now you're talking in front of 20 or 30 adults, and you're no longer the expert in the room, right? In my band class, I was the expert in the room. I mean, I was the teacher, but now we're all teachers. So staff meeting, okay, now I'm nervous again. Then it would be in a second language for me because I was in immersion school. So now I'm even more nervous, but then eventually get used to that. And I remember the first few concerts as a teacher. Now I'm talking to a gym full of parents, right? And there's an expectation there that, at public speaking, and how to conduct yourself. And so there'd be a new level of nervousness there. And then you go, and it just, each time you can expand into a different zone of discomfort, and there's learning to be had there. So don't be afraid. If we're still on the what advice would you have question, then that would be certainly one piece of advice, is don't be afraid to put yourself into those situations. And they'll be rough, but you'll learn.
And I know in the position that you're in right now, I think it's sort of slowed down a little bit, but you get many, many, many emails and phone calls from teachers, especially during this time of difficulty as we all try to transition into this new kind of teaching. Do you have any just words of advice, not even musical words of advice, just words of advice to help what people are going through right now?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of teachers that are struggling right now, and it's a difficult time, and not just for teachers, but for the kids too, and for the parents. And it's, my advice would be, don't think that this is normal. We can't make normal out of this. Um, this is not like we're taking our teaching and now, okay, now we're going to do it from home, and that's just the way it's going to be. The kids are struggling, parents are struggling, teachers are struggling, and society in general right now is having a really tough time. and mental health is really important. I mean, mental health, and I've said this to my members many times, mental health is health. Health is health, whether it's physical or mental. We need to take care of ourselves physically and mentally. And if you're struggling, then if we're struggling with physical health, you see somebody, and if you're struggling with mental health, you see somebody. It's just, it has to be dealt with, and don't struggle alone. But the concept and the idea that what we're doing now is just simply teaching from home or homeschooling or whatever, it's, I mean, this is, at the Manitoba Teacher Society, I think they've been putting out the concept of what this is it's emergency remote teaching is what we're doing. We're doing our best, and teachers are doing everything they can to get it out there, but so many of them have their own kids that they're trying to help out and take care of their needs as well. And my advice would be simply, I guess if I could just wrap that thought up, don't be too hard on yourselves, and don't let too many external pressures be hard on you either. You're doing what you can, and what you can do right now is if you're doing your best, and that's good. Like, just be good with what you're doing. Don't try to don't be a superhero. Just do what you can do, and make sure that you are healthy.
Excellent words of advice. I know there was one question that I missed asking you, but that may have to be saved for another day.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
You know what? Why not? Why not?
Okay.
Did you think of a weird or strange gig that you were involved in at any point that you could quickly share with us?
Well, as you've been saying to your other interviewees,
it's a family show.
It's a family show. Yeah, it's a family show. I know. It's not so much a strange gig. It's just a weird concept. I was thinking. I played when I was in university. As a summer job, I played in the band of the Ceremonial Guard.
Right.
94, 95, 96, which sounds like a century ago, but those 3 years I played. For those who don't know, the Band of the Ceremonial Guard, it's in Ottawa. And during the summer months, they do a parade where they do the ceremonial changing of the guard on Parliament Hill. And so they go and they audition university students from across Canada, and they play in this band for May, June, July, into August, I think. I can't remember the exact dates anymore. And so we would march through the downtown of Ottawa, and it would be about a 15-minute march to get to Parliament Hill. We'd be on Parliament Hill for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'd march back to the muster point there. And Ottawa in the summer is hot. It's humid. It's close to the Great Lakes there, and it can be hot. And I remember days when the humidex is 40, 45, even 50 degrees Celsius. So it was hot. And in addition to that, of course, you're wearing a wool tunic and a bearskin hat. I think the pants were wool as well. Either way, it was hot. And fortunately in the band, we're moving enough that you could keep your mind active. For that 45 minutes when you're standing still, we would be playing at least, we'd play a tune, and then we'd stop and we'd wait a few minutes while the guards were doing their changing ceremony, and then we'd play another tune, and then that would keep our minds active. But the poor guards, they would have to stand at attention or even standing at ease, but either way, it was motionless for a long time. And in that kind of heat, to be standing completely still with the sun beating down on you, and again, with the bearskin hats and the wool tunics and not moving, it was a strange gig, because it's the only gig I could think of where it was normal and not uncommon at all to see people passing out. Like, we'd be standing in the band, and you could see somebody kind of going like off in the distance, because they'd all be lined up, perfectly in at attention, in formation, and then you'd see one going and be like, uh-oh. And then, and somebody would pass out, and then they'd come out, and the medics would come, and they'd put the person on a stretcher, and they'd take them off or whatever. But it just to me, it was a strange concept that I had to, at the time, I didn't even think of it or think anything of it, because it was just normal. Like, oh, somebody passed out today. Okay. I don't know too many other musical gigs that I can think of or any of my colleagues where it's like, just normal, somebody passed out.
Did you ever pass out?
Keeping in mind that it's a family show again.
Yeah.
Did I ever?
Yeah.
Is that what you asked? No, sorry. No, and like I said, the band members generally didn't, because at least we could move a little bit.
Right.
We'd be like, not necessarily, we'd be at attention, we would be at ease, or we'd be playing the instruments, but every few minutes there was at least some sort of movement where it's like, okay, your body would be re-engaged, your brain would reactivate, and okay, focused on the music, I'm playing the march or whatever tune it is, and then you'd be standing there again for a few minutes. But it was the guards that had a harder time, because they were just motionless in that heat. So it's maybe not a strange gig per se, but just the concept of the reality that, people would pass out regularly and nobody thought much of it. It was just normal.
Well, it was definitely a character building gig.
It was a good gig. Again, it's one of those things where, like we were talking about earlier, it's about surrounding yourself with people that are better than you. When I got into that band, I was one of the younger members, and it was like, holy crap, these people are good. Again, they do auditions from across Canada to get into that band. So I was fortunate enough to get in. But I was, I guess I was a relatively big fish in a very small sea at the time. And then once you open that up, it was eye-opening, and it was great. And it was great that other people from Brandon University at the time actually got in as well. So we were all in a similar boat where it's like, okay, this sounds good. Like, these people can really play. So it was a really good experience.
Well, I'm so glad I asked you that. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for taking time out of today, even though I'm going to see you in a couple minutes anyways. Neat to get to talk to you this way. It feels very formal.
It does. I've been no stranger to the Zoom meeting format, I'll tell you that. But that's the way it goes these days.
Well, Chris Darazsi, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And thanks so much again for agreeing to do this interview.
All right. Well, you take care, Joanne Koshluck.
Bye.